Then on Sports Central, we go over a college football game preview and prediction on the big matchup coming up here in the Big Ten in Week 7 of this 2022 college football season. And it's going to be over the Penn State and Nittany Lions and the Michigan Wolverines. Huge matchup for both these teams coming up here in Week 7. You got Penn State, who's ranked 10th in the nation right now. They're 5-0 on the season, and they're looking to have a statement win here going up against Michigan, the defending Big Ten champions. And if Michigan wants to once again win a Big Ten title this season, this is a crucial game for them as we head into Week 7. We'll be over a full game preview and prediction on this matchup here today, starting out with your team trends. Penn State beat Northwestern 17-7 a couple of weeks ago, and they're 5-0 on the season, coming off of a bye week as well. And Penn State, beating Northwestern 17-7, kind of a pretty underwhelming game there. Northwestern being probably the worst team in the Big Ten. You'd expect to beat them by more, especially in a home game, but nonetheless, a win's a win, and Penn State is still undefeated. And of course, Michigan, they beat Indiana 31-10. That game was way closer than it should have been for a while, but Michigan got the win in the end. They're 6-0 on the season, ranked 5th in the nation. So once again, it is a top 10 matchup, and probably the biggest game in the Big Ten to this point in the 2022 season. Games will be on Saturday, October 15th in Ann Arbor. So Michigan is the home team for this one, and it's at noon Eastern. Spread's going Michigan here by 7. So Wolverines are favored here by a touchdown, over under 51. And your FPI is going Michigan 73.3%. Series history, Michigan leads at 15-10. They won the last matchup, but Penn State has actually won 3 out of the last 5. So Penn State has been pretty competitive against Michigan in years past. But obviously this can be expected to be more of a lower scoring matchup. You got two good defenses here. Both offenses are good as well. Especially I feel like Michigan's offense is in particular shows a lot of potential, but defensively, that's really where both teams shine in this matchup. So you could expect more of a lower scoring match between Michigan and Penn State. But once again, Michigan won last year's matchup, but Penn State has won 3 out of the last 5. Stat comparison for this one, Penn State 23rd in points per game, 9th in points allowed. They're 53rd in passers per game, 20th in rush yards, and then for yards allowed, 88th in passing, and then 5th in rushing. So, once again, even if you look at Michigan here, their offensive stats are, they're 5th in points per game this season. But then again, you got to look at Michigan's strength of schedule. You got to consider this team played. Their first 3 games were Colorado State, Hawaii, and UConn, 3 of the worst teams in the FBS, and they scored over 50 in each of those. So, it's no mistake that Michigan is still ranked in the top 5 in points per game, but you got to consider, too, this is far and away the best opponent they've played so far this season. They're 4th in points allowed, 60th in passers per game, 16th in rush yards, and then for yards allowed, 6th in passing, 4th in rushing. So both teams good in the rushing game if you're looking at the offensive side of the ball, and in passing, not quite as much, but both teams are still decent in the passing game. These are 2 very similar teams here if you look at it in depth. You got 2 quarterbacks who are good but not great, and J.J. McCarthy and Sean Clifford, and you got 2 defenses that have proven to be strong this season, although I would say Michigan's defense is or has been better, at least against Penn State so far this season. Your recent matches, Penn State beat Northwestern 17-7, beat Central Michigan 33-14. So their last 2 wins have been, they're wins, obviously, but they just haven't been terribly impressive. That win against Auburn, though, was impressive. They beat them 41-12, and Auburn, quite honestly, is just not a good football team this season, but Penn State took care of them on the road in a tough environment. That goes to show, Penn State can go on the road and compete pretty tough in tough environments. And Michigan is definitely going to be exactly that. And they beat Ohio 46-10, beat Purdue on the road back in week 1, 35-31, in what was a crucial game and definitely an impressive win there for Penn State going on the road to a good Purdue team that is currently 4-2. Michigan beat Indiana 31-10, beat Iowa 27-14. They beat Maryland 34-27. So they've had a couple of closer games there in conference so far this season against mediocre opponents in Indiana and Maryland. They took care of Iowa for the most part. But that Maryland game especially was close for a long time. So, and they beat UConn obviously 59-0, beat Hawaii 56-10, and also blew out Colorado State back in week 1. So, Michigan was dominant in those first 3 games once again. Those were 3 of probably the worst teams in the FBS. They had a very weak non-conference schedule. But, Michigan, the thing is about this football team, too, if you look at their games in the conference, their recent 3 matchups in the Big Ten, they controlled Iowa from the start, quite honestly. But Maryland and Indiana especially, there was something concerning to me about both of those games with Michigan. This is a team that was fairly slow, especially to start in both those games. I mean, Maryland hung around the entire time against Michigan, even though Michigan took care of Indiana in the second half. But, I mean, I feel like this is a Michigan team. They're deserving of being ranked 5th in the nation right now. You can't get me wrong there, but I feel like this is a Michigan team that down the stretch, they've got a chance to have a disappointing performance. And whether that's in this matchup or down the road against a ranked opponent, I feel like it's going to happen eventually for Michigan. So, unless this team turns things around and they have a dominant win here, or, even if they can win this matchup, I think that's going to go a long way. But Michigan has been questionable at points this season. They're 6-0. You can't get me wrong. They've won every game, but they have been not terribly dominant in some of these matchups where you'd expect them to be if they, as they are a top 5 team right now. Your key points for this one: Penn State coming up of a bye. They got something to prove, obviously. Penn State being a team that's kind of in the background of the Big Ten East. You got Michigan and Ohio State, the two most talked about teams far and away in the Big Ten East. And then you got Penn State back here, who is still undefeated as well. They're 2-0 in conference, and Penn State can definitely jump into that conversation more seriously if they can get a win here. They're strong on both sides of the ball, especially on defense. And a key factor in this game is going to be forcing turnovers. Going on the road to a tough environment, forcing turnovers will be huge, and they got to be very strong in offense, which they haven't really been against their previous 2 opponents. So we got to see that offense be better in this matchup if they want a chance to knock off Michigan. They scored 17 against Northwestern. You're going to have to score more than 17 points if you want to beat Michigan here. As for the Wolverines, they're undefeated, but they got no significant wins so far. And it's something to keep an eye on. This is the first ranked opponent that Michigan has played this season. Same for Auburn as well, by the way. Maybe Auburn's played a tougher schedule to this point in the season, but both teams have not played a ranked opponent yet. This is obviously the first big test for Michigan, and you could also say for Penn State, definitely the most crucial game so far. They also got the home field advantage, which is definitely going to come in huge in this matchup. Michigan is a brutal place to play. It's the Big House for a reason. Michigan is a very strong team at home, and that's going to be a key factor in this one. But that said, let's get to the prediction here for Penn State and Michigan, the big matchup coming up here in the Big Ten this weekend. And I'm going to go with Michigan here. 28-24 is my predicted final score. This is a tough one to pick, too. You got Michigan and Penn State, two teams that, once again, are pretty similar on both sides of the ball. Michigan being slightly better statistically so far this season, even though, once again, Penn State probably has played a tougher schedule to this point. But Michigan being at home, I feel like this team being at home for the first time in a couple of weeks, they come out, they have a strong start, get up by a couple of touchdowns, and Penn State's going to hang around. But I just feel like in the end, Michigan is going to pull this one out in a close one. I'll say 55% towards Michigan. Over-under is 51. Give me the over for this one. This is obviously, this could change as well. These are just the opening odds. But right now I've got 52 total points in this matchup with a 28-24 win, and that has me taking the over as of right now, and Penn State covering the spread in the end. I do think Penn State hangs around. This is going to be a close game, and I'm pretty confident, especially if Michigan is still favored by 7 once we get to Saturday, that Penn State will cover the spread, especially considering this more than likely will be a lower scoring matchup. And I think Penn State, coming off of a bye, will be ready to go for this one, and they're definitely going to keep it competitive. But in the end, Michigan is the better team. I like Michigan on offense to score some points and get the win in the end here. So 28-24 is my predicted final score, but let me know your thoughts in the comments below on this matchup. And I appreciate you guys watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.